Today's job is to install a set of new Supertech heavy-duty valve springs into my VVT MX-5 engine's head. G'day folks, my name is Brendan. It's fantastic to have you here again at BEAVIS Motorsport, where today we're installing a set of these Supertech valve springs into my engine's VVT MX-5 head. The reason we're doing this is because, well, the valve springs are a good thing to upgrade when you start playing with things like turbochargers. These are a slightly heavier duty spring than the OEM setup, so they'll be certainly suitable for this engine. I opted for the Supertech springs. They're a good value option, pretty easily available, and generally well recommended by most of the guys in the US who build MX-5 MIATA engines. This particular set of Supertech springs are a 9.6 pound per mil OEM size coil spring. They're slightly shorter or not quite as tall as the OEM spring, but they have a larger, lower seat. They also come with a set of titanium retainers, which was a nice piece of kit. All in all, a full kit. Fairly well cost effective, well, in terms of engine components anyway. The installation isn't really that hard. There's plenty of YouTube videos on how to do it. You just need kind of a few snazzy tools that are fairly easily available. It is a little bit fiddly, mostly just with the tiny little clips that you've got to use to hold the retainers in place, but I'll get to showing you that in a moment. Anyway, the first thing we need to do is take off the cams so that we can get to the valves. Well, we got the camshafts off. It's now time to install these nice, neat, sexy looking new springs. Now the valve spring compressor tool I've got is this generic $30 eBay unit. You've got your two end towers, there's a rod that runs between them, and then there's this handle with a plunger tool that squeezes it all down. It's fairly easy to use. It just requires some sort of compression or tension up against the other side of the valve to stop it from pushing down as you press down on the lever. In our case, we've just stuffed up a crunched up rag under the head of the engine, under the valve, to stop it from pushing down as we press down with this plunger arm. So you can see here the difference between the original spring and the new Supertech spring. Fundamentally, it's the same setup, it's just that the Supertech stuff is a stronger spring, and it's a dual spring. Also, the Supertech is a little shorter than the OEM one, but this lower seat is much thicker than this little sort of spacer washer shim that we've got here. The upper retainers, again, more or less the same physical dimensions, although the Supertech ones are titanium. Other than that, yeah, as I mentioned, these are a dual spring setup, so there's a spring inside a spring there, which is a little bit interesting. These are obviously a heavier duty or a stiffer spring than the OEM one. That is the whole purpose of why I'm swapping them. And of course, the last thing I should mention is the little retainer clips. These guys, you don't want to lose them. They're really tiny, they're hard to get in. It's worth maybe getting a few spares if you end up doing this job for yourself, because it's pretty easy to lose them. Now there's kind of a million ways to do this, a million different tools, and there's 100 different instruction manuals and YouTube videos that already exist on how to get these things in and out. So I'm just going to do it. I don't really think I need to explain. Effectively, you need some sort of tool to compress the valve, push the thing in, get the valve springs out, put it all back together, and as usual, the hard bit's getting the tiny little fellas that retain it all in. Yeah, you know the deal. Let's just get this thing done. Now that all our intake valves are upgraded, it's time to move the compressor tool over to the exhaust side of the head. We've got an unfortunate situation where for some reason one of the 16 valve spring retainers doesn't match the rest. You can see this one is noticeably larger in diameter than the OEM one, and the spring just does not seat at all properly like it should. All the other ones went on nice and snug. This one's measurably larger in diameter, and the shape underneath here is noticeably different. So I've got in touch with Trackspeed and sent a message saying, hey, this one somehow was mispackaged by Supertech, and this one specific, only one retainer is wrong. All the others are perfectly fine and installed. We're stuck with one that for some reason doesn't match the others. It's just some sort of mismatch in packaging or manufacturing or something. So hopefully they'll get me a replacement out fairly soon. But anyway, back to putting the engine, or the head, back together. Now the one tip I did want to cover off is around the reassembly, well, and disassembly of the valve retainers from the valves. So we've got our little plunger tool, and it pushes down on the retainer. With the valve held in place, the retainer falls down, our little clips fall out, and the retainer can come away. That's the easy part, the disassembly. The tricky thing is the reassembly. You go and you put your new little clips in around your new titanium retainer, you set that on top of the valve, and the idea is as this plunger pushes down on the retainer, the valve will come up through it, and you kind of pray that the retainer will fall down, the two clips will fall around the valve and then snug into their position, and then as you release the pressure from this plunging tool, the retainer will come up and everything will seat where you want it. The unfortunate thing is the little retaining clips, they tend to kind of splay around everywhere and they never really go where you want them to. So we came up with a really simple idea, was using a rolled up piece of plastic. This is actually some plastic packing tape, about 7 layers of it, and we found if we set that over the top of the retainer with the clips and then use that as a bit of a cushion over the plunge tool, as we plunged down it would kind of keep everything in place. And so as we forced the retainer down over the valve, the worst case we'd have the valve pop a hole through the plastic, but the plastic would kind of keep all the retainer and the clips and everything where we wanted them, and so we could push down, pop up. Worst case we get a hole in this and we throw away and make another one, but it seemed to produce a pretty good result, and we got a nice production line going, and things sort of finished, went pretty quickly then. So that's our little tip. If you're going to use this tool, throw something like a piece of clear plastic. The clear is handy because then we could sort of see where things were going. Clear plastic over the top, plunge it all down, and it went really well for us. Well, anyway folks, that's the Supertech valve spring installation complete. Well, almost complete. We're like 90% there. Unfortunately, we have got this one spring we can't install because we've got one retainer that somehow is wrong. Anyway, Track Speed have already replied to the email, even in just a few minutes between me farting around and setting up the camera, and they've said they'll get a new retainer sent out. So I'm sure we'll have it sorted fairly soon. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. As always, you can find us at BEAVIS Motorsport, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, well, obviously because you're watching me on YouTube, all of that stuff. We'll see you next time.